What if I told you that Africa was once home to empires richer than Europe? Cities that sparkled with gold. Kingdoms where justice ruled long before colonizers arrived. Before the first European ships touched our shores. Before maps carved up our lands without consent. Africa was already rising. This continent thrived with mighty empires and sophisticated civilizations. In the West, the Kingdom of Mali stood tall, a beacon of wealth, trade, and scholarship. Its greatest ruler, Mansa Musa, wasn't just a king. He was the richest human to ever walk the earth. And when he journeyed to Mecca, he carried so much gold, he shook the global economy, causing inflation across nations. Then came Timbuktu, not a myth, but a monument of manuscripts. A city where scholars debated science, astronomy, and law. Long before Europe stumbled into its renaissance. Further south, the Benin Empire flourished. Walls longer than China's Great Wall guarded its cities. Its people carved bronze so intricate, so advanced. They left European invaders speechless. This was a nation of artists, engineers, and lawmakers. And in the heart of the Sahel, the Songhai Empire rose. One of the largest in African history. Its cities, Gao and Gen, were military strongholds and academic sanctuaries. Generals led the charge, while scholars shaped the minds. These were not scattered tribes. These were nations. Nations of order. Of power. Of pride. This was Africa before colonization. The Africa they never taught you about. Let's dive in. Long before Europe knew of Africa's greatness, a mighty kingdom thrived in the Horn of Africa, the Kingdom of Axum. By the 4th century AD, Axum was already a global trading power. Its ships sailed across the Red Sea and Indian Ocean, exchanging gold, ivory, frankincense, and textiles with Rome, Byzantium, Arabia, and even India. And Axum didn't just trade, it stamped its own coins, written in Gez, an ancient African script that still survives today. These coins weren't just currency, they were symbols of sovereignty, showing kings wearing crowns, holding crosses, and asserting power equal to any European empire. But Axum's legacy wasn't only in gold. It was one of the first Christian kingdoms in the world, adopting Christianity long before most of Europe. Its ruler, King Ezana, declared it the state religion in the 4th century, making Ethiopia one of the earliest homes of Christianity on earth. Across its land stood giant stone obelisks, carved from a single piece of granite, some rising over 20 meters high. These architectural wonders still stand today in Axum, towering monuments to the kingdom's engineering, faith, and ambition. And when outsiders came looking for gold and glory, they were stunned to find a civilization so advanced, one that wrote its own history, spoke its own language, and never bowed to foreign rule. Axum didn't just exist, it influenced nations, commanded seas, and stood tall among the great powers of the ancient world. This was not a forgotten corner of Africa. This was Ethiopia. This was Axum, the empire of kings, faith, and unshaken pride. In the heart of West Africa, where gold flowed like water and culture ran deep, rose one of the continent's greatest kingdoms, the Ashanti Empire of present-day Ghana. By the 18th century, the Ashanti had built a thriving civilization centered in Kumasi, with organized armies, a sophisticated bureaucracy, and a wealth that made European powers tremble with envy. Their symbol? The golden stool, not just a throne, but the sacred soul of the Ashanti nation. No king could rule without it. No foreigner was ever allowed to touch it. It represented unity, tradition, and spiritual authority passed down from the ancestors. The Ashanti were masters of gold craftsmanship, with dazzling jewelry, regal attire, and royal palaces adorned with intricate carvings and sacred stools. They traded gold, cola nuts, and slaves across vast networks, and they did so on their own terms. And when the British came, they didn't meet submission, they met resistance. Under leaders like Yera Santwe, the warrior Queen Mother, the Ashanti fought back with courage that echoed through time. She led the Ashanti in the War of the Golden Stool, standing boldly against the mighty British Empire, declaring, "Speaking head in silhouette # if the men will not fight, then we the women will." Though eventually colonized, the Ashanti spirit was never conquered. Their traditions, language, and identity remain strong today, still beating in the heart of Ghana, a nation born from royal pride and unbreakable will. This is more than history, this is heritage. This is Ashanti. In Central Africa, stretching from today's Angola to parts of the Congo and Gabon, stood a mighty kingdom with kings, cathedrals, and culture, the Kingdom of Congo. Founded in the 14th century, Congo had a centralized monarchy, provinces governed by nobles, and a diplomatic class fluent in international politics. By the late 1400s, Congo was already in contact with Portugal. But unlike many early encounters in Africa, this was not war, it was diplomacy. Congo kings embraced Christianity and sent emissaries to Europe. King Nzingaran Kuwu was baptized as João I, and his son, Afonso I, became one of the first African rulers to write letters in Portuguese, govern through European-style bureaucracy, and exchange gifts with the Vatican. But this relationship would be tested. As the transatlantic slave trade grew, so did Portuguese greed. Afonso I pleaded with the King of Portugal to stop the illegal enslavement of his people, but his words were ignored. The once equal alliance turned to exploitation. Congo's cities were raided, its people stolen, its dignity trampled. Yet resistance fled again and again, most famously under Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, a related kingdom. She outwitted colonizers for decades with military tactics and political alliances. Though colonized in time, the memory of Congo remains. Of a kingdom that stood tall, spoke many languages, mastered trade, and negotiated with kings across oceans, before Europe ever saw Africa as more than a prize. This was not a land of tribes, it was a kingdom of kings. Before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, Carthage stood as Africa's shining star. Founded by the Phoenicians in what is now modern-day Tunisia, Carthage became a naval and commercial empire, controlling trade routes from Spain to the Middle East. Its harbor was an engineering wonder. Its navy? Unmatched. Its people? Masters of commerce, seafaring, and diplomacy. Carthaginian merchants traded gold, silver, ivory, glass, and purple dye, a luxury worn by kings. But what made Carthage legendary was Hannibal, the brilliant general who marched war elephants across the Alps to strike fear into the heart of Rome. For over a decade, he fought Rome on its own soil, undefeated in battle after battle. The Romans called it the Punic Wars. But to Africa, it was resistance. Even as Rome grew stronger, Carthage refused to bow. It took 3 brutal wars to bring the city to its knees. In 146 BCE, Rome finally burned Carthage to the ground, salted the earth, and erased it from textbooks. But what they couldn't erase was the memory of an African empire that once rivaled the greatest power the world had ever seen. When people speak of great civilizations, they name Greece, Rome, China. But long before them all, there was Kemet, what the world now calls ancient Egypt, the crown jewel of African civilization. A land where science, medicine, and architecture flourished. Where scholars studied astronomy, performed surgery, and built structures so precise, we still can't explain them. The pyramids weren't built by aliens. They were built by Africans. With math, muscle, and mastery. The Nile was more than a river. It was a lifeline for commerce, agriculture, and spiritual wisdom. Pharaohs ruled with complex laws. Women could own land. Doctors performed brain surgery. They recorded it all on papyrus scrolls and temple walls. The world took from Egypt its calendar, its writing system, its medicine, and even its philosophy. But when invaders came, they separated Egypt from Africa, tried to bleach its legacy, tried to hide the truth in museums and myths. But the truth remains. Egypt was African. Egypt is African. A civilization of black brilliance that lit the torch of humanity. And now, we pass that torch on. In the southern lands of Africa, where mountains touch the skies and rivers run deep, a leader once rose who reshaped history with nothing but vision, discipline, and the spirit of a warrior. Shaka Zulu. Born in hardship, raised in exile, Shaka would become one of Africa's most brilliant military minds. With revolutionary battle tactics, like the short-stabbing spear and the bull horn formation, he transformed scattered clans into a unified force, the Zulu Kingdom. His warriors didn't just fight, they flowed like water, fast and unbreakable. From the hills of KwaZulu-Natal, Shaka's Zulu army grew into one of the most powerful forces in southern Africa. His reign brought structure, identity, and a sense of unity among fractured communities. He wasn't just a king. He was an architect of nationhood. But as the Zulu Empire rose, so did the shadows of European greed. First came the Dutch settlers. Then the British Empire. What began as trade turned into land seizures. Then into wars. Then into dispossession. The Zulu Kingdom, under successors like Sethweo, would resist with strength and honor, even defeating the British at Isandlwana in 1879, a shocking victory that humiliated one of the world's greatest empires. But resistance came at a price. British forces returned with vengeance, burning Zulu villages, imprisoning leaders, and dismantling the kingdom's power. And as the 20th century approached, South Africa was transformed, not by growth, but by apartheid, a brutal system of racial segregation and oppression built on stolen land and stolen power. The legacy of Shaka, unity, pride, and African strength, was buried under decades of silence. But history remembers. And now, so do we. In the heart of West Africa lies a land soaked in legacy, modern-day Nigeria, where mighty civilizations rose long before colonizers ever set sail. Long before the world marveled at pyramids, there were the Nok. The Nok civilization, thriving over 2,500 years ago, left behind terracotta sculptures with such technical precision, they stunned modern archaeologists. These weren't primitive relics, they were masterpieces. The Nok people farmed, forged iron, and crafted identity at a time when much of Europe was still in tribal disarray. Then came the Oyo Empire, one of the most powerful Yoruba kingdoms in African history. From their capital, Oyo ruled with a well-structured political system. The Alaafin, their king, was powerful, but never absolute. His authority was checked by the Oyo Messi, a council that represented the people. Their cavalry thundered across the savannah, controlling trade routes and expanding influence with both force and diplomacy. Meanwhile, in the east, the Igbo people crafted an entirely different model of governance. No kings. No thrones. Just assemblies. Elders. Councils. Consensus. A decentralized, democratic society centuries before the West claimed the idea. In the north, Hausa city-states rose like stars. Kano. Katsina. Zaria. Dora. Cities fortified with walls and rich in Islamic scholarship, trade, and architecture. Hausa rulers governed through Islamic law, trade networks reached into North Africa, and scribes wrote in Arabic while markets overflowed with salt, leather, and gold. Nigeria was not a collection of tribes. It was a network of civilizations, sophisticated, organized, and thriving. But then, the invaders came. Under the banners of trade and civilization, European powers forced their way in. They saw kingdoms and called them tribes. They broke systems they didn't understand. They turned kings into puppets, elders into prisoners, and resources into property. Britain claimed the land, not through merit, but but through manipulation. And by 1914, they had merged over 250 distinct ethnic nations into a colony they called Nigeria, not out of unity, but for control. They didn't bring civilization. They interrupted it.